All right, it's 12:30. I'll get started here. Welcome everybody. This is the panel on scaling cannabinoid production. I am Bryant Jones. I am a horticultural researcher from the University of Minnesota. I have my own lab there, and we work on making cannabis production, hemp right now, easier for the farmer. Um, with me today, I'm going to allow these people to introduce themselves, and we will get this discussion on the road.
I'm Scott Wall. I own New Age Laboratories in South Haven, Michigan. We're a broad spectrum analytical laboratory doing chemistry, biological, microbiological. We work everything from environmental testing to agricultural, horticultural, and food safety. I also own a 170-acre farm in South Haven. So we're working on everything from plant nutrition to preventative investigations to mitigate uptake of heavy metals and pesticides into cannabis, but also looking at how can we adjust plant nutrition to optimize cannabinoid production and terpene productions. So those are the types of things that we're focusing on.
Cool.
And my name is Atlanta Elkins. I own Elkins Hemp Company, which is a research facility, and I work with startups. I'm basically everything seed to sale. I am mainly focused on helping people learn how to cultivate their own medicine and bringing medicine to people that don't have access to it all around the country, as well as activism, sustainability. I like to make improvements to the industry, and that's kind of what I do. So I'm gonna pass the mic.
Cool. I'm Tim Horace. I'm Vice President of Cultivation at Agronomics USA, co-founder as well. We're a vertically integrated hemp company. We do everything from clones in the spring through extraction and then product manufacturing as well. I'm the guy that works with all the farms and consults with them and helps them have successful crops. So.
Excellent. So I'd probably like to start with introducing the topic of cannagriculture. Anybody want to touch on that and what that means to them directly in their line of work or
Cannagriculture?
Cannagriculture.
Cannagriculture.
Yeah.
Imagine a brand new industry coming into an industry that's been around since we existed. That's pretty much what it is. We haven't been allowed to cultivate this crop in the last 100 years, so our knowledge is very depleted compared to places like China where they were never prohibited, especially in the hemp area, not really much in the marijuana area. But that's how I would word it, probably.
Yeah, it's really evolving, and it has. I think unfortunately it has a couple different branches. We have cannagriculture that is focused towards medical use. So there's a lot of focus on how do we make it as safe and as pure as possible, and we're optimizing the cannabinoid and the minor terpenes or minor cannabinoid levels as high as we possibly can, while eliminating as many contaminants and adulterants as possible. Then there's the other side of that tends towards what we want to refer to as hemp. But is still all cannabis. And that is really more along the lines of conventional agriculture. And how do we produce as much biomass as possible? And what kind of products and markets can we get that into? And all of this is an industry that is coming out of the shadows. And sometimes the industry is not beneficial to itself. It tends to trip over itself. We tend to think of ourselves as unique instead of realizing that we are an industry, but we have a unique product.
Just another cog in the machine. Okay. I'd like to let you guys touch on some of your cultivation schemes, some of the inputs and outputs or plant culture as it applies specifically to you?
Yeah, so I mean, we source good genetics for basically making CBD products. You know, we're interested in the minor cannabinoids as well as the CBD percentage, obviously. So, purposefully giving those strains to farms to produce the best extracts and medicine possible.
I'm kind of the opposite side of the spectrum. So when he said CBD, which is a very common cannabinoid, we work and we've been breeding and searching around the world for better or not better, but more potent strains with cannabinoids such as THCV, which is less common and comes at a very smaller percentage in most plants. I think that's probably the only difference between his answer and my answer. He covered it really well rounded.
Restate your question for me so I can.
Some of your what type of methods do you cultivate with? What are your preferred methods of cultivation? Some of your inputs, also, and maybe some of your desired outputs.
So, across all the farms that we work with and grow operations, in fact, we were just talking just before we started. We have grows that are hydroponics. And that can include deep water recycling to gutter projects, outdoor grows that are raised, that can be very prepared lined beds to just open field cultivation. Greenhouses, fully enclosed grow operations. And within those fully enclosed operations and greenhouses, there is just a ton of varieties of, you know, whether or not how much automation they involve, how much HVAC system they involve. So the cultivation spectrum is very broad. You know, you want to say keep it simple. Don't get don't make it overly complex before you figure out what works for you. It's about getting the product to market in a timely fashion, and then start investing in technology.
Yeah, that's what I tell my clients, never to put the cart before the horse. Go on, jump on.
So like he said, we were talking about hydroponics, and he made a really good point. Whenever you're looking at what you're doing when you're growing, you want to look at what your wants are and what your needs are, what you have available to do whatever you want to do, especially as a cultivator. So if you want to be a small boutique family-owned farm, you need to look at, you know, deep water culture hydroponics are the most sustainable option to keep your your overall costs down and your production rates up. And if you're like me right now, I'm working on a hemp research farm outside. I don't even till half of my farm because I'm working on a no-till method. So you can look and see what you're looking to grow or what you're looking to grow for. You should look and kind of do your due diligence on different methods and what applies best for what you're seeking to get out of it. And that's really important too, because I see a lot of people that have one goal and they're growing just the entirely wrong way for it. And you don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, no, that gets perfect segue into my next topic was what's the differences in cultivating a small scale versus large scale, and why ever increase your footprint, and some of those pitfalls that people tend to every year fall down.
Yeah. The why question's probably the best part of that. Why? You have to have a good reason to grow substantial acreages of hemp. You better know exactly where it's going to go when it's done, and have that all figured out before anything goes in the ground. Typically, we're 2 to 5 acres with most of our farms. Probably the biggest one that we've worked with did 15. So we're definitely on the smaller scale of things. It's a lot of work. So, when you go big, you have to start using machinery, and a lot of times that ends up hurting the quality of the product that's being produced. So
that's very true. For us, I would also argue that the same thing he said, the why, that's probably the biggest part, and the where also. Like, you do not want to be putting certain systems such as, there's a sea of green technique where you put a bunch of crops next to each other. And it just does not make sense for me, if in certain ways, to use that technique if I'm going for other ideas or another goal. I'm very wide spectrum in this industry. So I work not only in industrial hemp, but also small scale boutique hydroponic cannabis indoor. So when I'm looking at scaling, we start small. The startup I'm working on right now, we're only starting with 4 rooms, and we're expecting over $5 million in revenue in our first year. So with that being said, it's all about your production, how you set yourself up, your amount of knowledge. And honestly, before you scale up, you need to make sure that you have a really good understanding of what you're doing, because the last thing that you want is a big operation that you just can't really handle on your own.
Yeah. Why is scaling in phases important to production?
Yeah, like she just mentioned, definitely start small. You know, in 2019 is when hemp became legal in Illinois, when the hemp program started. I had tons of guys that, you know, they just knew it was worth a lot of money. So they came in, you know, let's do 50 acres of hemp. Like, how about you start with 5 and talk to me next year about 50 acres of hemp after you kind of get your feet wet. Definitely always good year one to start on the small side. Get your head wrapped around everything that's going to be involved with growing this crop and harvesting it, which is definitely the most labor intensive part. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that almost all scale ups are undercapitalized. You know, the concept is, oh, I can go to 50 acres, or I can go to 100 acres, or I'm going to go to an 80,000 square foot indoor. They almost all they underestimate what their capital needs are going to be. And if something doesn't go exactly right, you have to have cash to fall back on. And because you can't go to most conventional lending entities are not going to step up and say, oh, fine, yeah, you raise cannabis, we'll give you more money. That's not going to happen. And expect that the normal industries that handle agriculture, they don't always have the answer to your dilemma. There was no harvester that could handle cannabis. It creates a stalk that's, you know, several inches in diameter. It's tough as hell.
It's sticky.
You can go over it in one direction and harvest off the flower, and 2 days later that stalk will be standing back up. So you can come back through, but it'll tear up a whole lot of equipment. So you've got to know what you're going to be in for, and you got to have things that are specially, you know, kind of think about how you're going to design it, how you're going to handle it. You know, if you're going to need labor, where are you going to get labor from? Migrant. I mean, we've got enough specialty crop folks in blueberries and apples and stuff that can't get enough labor in their fields.
Exactly.
If you think you're just going to hire enough people to go out and chop stalks of cannabis and then stack it and lay it and get it in right, you better have a very good plan and know what you're going to deal with, because seasonal migrant labor is not easy to find.
No, it's not. I'd love to touch on that point.
Please.
Because when we harvest, I have all year round, I have just me. And and this is specific, I'm going to talk specifically about industrial hemp. We harvested last year. I was consulting and basically owning another company, trying to help another Texas farmer get off the ground and understand what he was doing. And I was doing it just out of the kindness of my heart. I wasn't employed. So when harvest came around, he had 5 people that were ready, and he couldn't even get his crops down, let alone transport them to safely dry before the material was ruined. We had to bring in my entire family and multiple of my friends to drive trucks, fill totes, hang plants, and it was a 2-week-long process. So whenever you're going to grow, especially industrial hemp, what he mentioned with materials and the equipment, there's a lot more sap in hemp than other products that are similar to it. So when you grow hemp and when you cut hemp, certain materials like a decorticator, which separates herds in the stalk, a regular average decorticator will get stuck because the sap clogs it up. So we have to purchase decorticators that are specifically designed, or we have to design decorticators ourselves. When we designed our decorticator, it was an extremely expensive process that we were not prepared for, and it almost destroyed our company. But we did it and we got it done, mostly because my grandfather's an engineer, so we had the skills in the family. But you need to watch out for those pitfalls, because I didn't know. And you're always going to have things. No one knows everything, especially no one knows everything going into it. So before you scale up, you need to think about, okay, the whole seed to sale process. Maybe you're not a full vertical operation, but you still need to know what's going on from seed to sale. What needs to happen here, 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 here to make it all work. And you don't want to be doing that when you already have plants in the ground and you're on a time frame. It's really important.
Yeah, don't start planning after you've planted.
Right. Yeah.
If you don't know where you're selling it and you've already got plants in the ground, you're already screwed.
Yeah, especially with the hemp market, it tanking the way that it did. I mean, I was seeing pounds go for so much higher before the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill. And now even the best pound I have my hands on in the country costs $400. So if you're growing indoors, keep that in mind. And I'm not saying that everything revolves around money in this industry, but it can bankrupt you if you don't have a decent plan in order. And you need to make sure that you have that seller or that buyer. The seller needs to have a buyer before you get anything planted.
Yeah.
And that used to maybe not have been the case, and I might not have said that a few years ago, but in this market, that's absolutely the case.
Yep.
I constantly tell clients to never put that cart before the horse. And
There you go.
you have to make sure that you have your buyers first, work backwards. I know in horticulture, we tend to work based off of the market, but cannabis is one of those weird ones where you really need to have your buyers lined up first, especially if you're going to put your own sweat capital into your endeavors. Did you want to speak a little on I know you do sap analysis.
Yeah.
And I know that's it's an area that is looked over by the common farmer, but I feel if there were random assays done in different places in their fields, using sap analysis, some of the inputs could save time and money.
Right. Yeah. So we're the only lab in the United States that does plant sap analysis, and it's like doing blood test analysis. Like when you go to the doctor says, "Well, we need you to go to get a blood draw first to see, what your sugar's like and stuff." That's what it is for plants, and so we do this for indoor grows, outdoor grows, all over the country. And what you're doing is you're steering the nutrition throughout the year to optimize your inputs. Instead of just throwing a lot of amendments at them all at the beginning of the year, you give the plant what it needs when it needs it. And if 40% of our business in sap analysis is coming from from the broad range cannabis industry, hemp all the way to medical and adult rec. And it's because these are industries that are hungry for good science about what's going on with these plants. And what we're seeing, just like in most agriculture, the plant is typically being cultivated with a deficiency in micronutrients, which is inhibiting its ability to convert nitrates and ammonia into total complex molecules. It's limiting its photosynthesis capabilities and protein synthesis. Well, if it's limiting those things, it's also limiting its secondary metabolite capabilities. If you want to optimize your cannabinoids and your terpenes, you got to give it all the building blocks. And so this is
Liebig's law.
Absolutely. If there's a limiting factor, the plant, if it's producing a protein or amino acid that it needs, and it needs to have a molybdenum molecule, and it's not there, it doesn't choose to, I'm going to use copper or I'm going to use iron. It just stops making that protein, and it falls apart. So you've got to make sure you have all these things all the time. Also, if you're dealing with things like sap-sucking pests, aphids, thrips, spider mites, these simple digestive system pests, they thrive on nitrates and ammonia. Converting all these simple forms of nitrogen over into complex molecules in a 24-hour period. If that nitrate is sitting in the sap at levels greater than about 25% of your total nitrogen, then that means that your crop is becoming basically a big infrared beacon to sap-sucking pests. Eat at Joe's. And you'll see fields right next to each other with two different types of nitrogen conversion rates, and one will be infested with a sap-sucking pest, thrips, spider mites. The other one won't. And the pest can sense that. You know, it's an infrared signal that comes from that.
Yeah.
You deal with that.
Yeah. We've in my lab, I'm looking at some of the things that turn on and off certain terpene production, and insect pressure is a very huge culprit of that. Certain insects bite differently and can promote a different response in the plant. There can be an immediate terpene production based off the type of insect that the plant is sensing. So I totally know what you mean. Does anybody else I know that you were talking about, you had a very tough pest problem.
I have one of the worst
insect.
pest problems in the country, actually.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I have a monumental grasshopper problem. I'm talking probably in the hundreds of thousands. Pops up every June. I'm trying to conquer it right now. That's part of what my research is on the hemp company. The whole purpose is actually not I do want to get the grasshopper problem under control before it moves in herds like the Great Depression era, but at the same time, it's mostly because I'm trying to figure out if I can kill them and then not hurt the soil. And at the end of the day, it sucks. And I did not, up until an hour ago, I had never met him, known his lab. He is the only one in the country that does plant sap analysis. If I would have, and now that I have him as a resource and am able to use him as a resource, I will be able to conquer my issues a lot faster with a lot more accuracy. And that just decreases cost and time. So
Yeah. I know other chemicals like brassica steroids, in the brassica family, they kind of deter certain things. Have you found anything specific to certain sap analysis that would get you to say, hey, this probably is your best bet against X predator or B predator?
Other than certain micros, we know that copper and selenium are really strong antifungals and help in pathogen protections. Copper's always been used as a pesticide, a natural pesticide, and it's often one of the compounds that's limiting. But we have to be very careful with copper, particularly if you're doing medical grade cannabis or adult, and you're being tested like in the state of Michigan. Copper is one of the heavy metals that is monitored in finished products. So you can use it, but you don't want to get too much. So you monitor it both ways. You want to make sure you got enough in the plant, but you don't want too much. So it's a balancing act.
Absolutely. How are you guys utilizing IPM at scale? I know you guys operate at a very high scale. So what are you doing in terms of IPM?
Well, we're relatively low scale. I mean,
you're still okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with IPM. What's the term?
Integrated pest management.
Yeah. So I mean, most of our grows are pretty small. Most organic solutions take care of the issues that we see, rather than now again finding out about the sap analysis. Definitely something we'll be looking into to recommend to our farms. A lot of tissue cultures when there is a deficiency or a pest issue, kind of helps lead us towards the correct solution.
Have you found any certain types of beneficial insects that are?
It's hard to keep ladybugs in the hemp field for too long.
Yes, it is.
They just kind of fly away. So not really on the beneficial insects things outdoors anyway.
Outdoors. Okay.
I think beneficials, if you're going to be, I think beneficials certainly have their place. And indoor grows can use them a little bit more efficiently than outdoor grows. But if you're going to use beneficials, plan ahead and be prepared to get them implemented into the field as quickly as soon as you see signs of your pest. Because if it gets too far, if you get behind the scale and your pest population gets too big, your beneficials just they can't make a dent. You get behind the 8 ball. So you've got to get those beneficials out there early enough to really keep the check on the pest early.
That's one dichotomy of horticulture is the ability to have this kind of omnipresent sense, for what's going to happen, what could possibly happen, and then still have the constraint of we still have to produce a plant at the end of this. So, there's kind of this God factor when it comes to horticulture that it's a constantly reoccurring thread of similarity. Since we have everybody here, I'd like to maybe if you could before we would close, like what would you want to lament to somebody who's looking to scale up or even start their own cultivation? What are the main points, reiterate those, and could lead them down the right direction?
Right. Definitely have your extractor lined up from the beginning. That's the way our company works. We do customers that buy the clones from us, they get 60-40 splits on their processing. So you need to have some type of arrangement like that from the outgo, and then work with that buyer processor, to their specs, what they're looking for, and just be cautious and grow slow.
I would tell them to look at full vertical integration, what they're going to do seed to sale, and break down, even if they're not fully vertically integrated, I would look at their increased yield or whatever you're trying to accomplish. You need to sit down and you need to look at your entire plan, because there are extra costs, especially when you're talking about scaling up cultivation and your integrated pest management and into other things like just in general, your harvest costs. I mean, every single thing when you scale up, and you need to be prepared before you scale up so that when you scale up, you don't miss some of those in front of, so that's probably the biggest thing I would tell someone, really and truly.
Well, I think we touched on it early. Make sure you're well capitalized. Make sure you've got enough cash. Pilot scale every decision. Don't implement something new before you pilot test it at a scalable size. So if you say, okay, I want to try this new seed vendor, get some of that seed and try it for 1 or 2 seasons at a small scale first. Make sure the germination rate's right. Make sure that it's as feminized if you want feminized. Make sure that you don't get a lot of hermaphrodites. Make sure that you're getting that it's not a hot seed. Not all seed is created equal, and not everything that you buy is going to be what they say it's going to be. So don't just jump into the deep end. Always try something and test it and trial it. Okay, and then use it at a bigger scale. You have to wade into the deep end. Don't jump into the deep end. There are a lot of hemp and cannabis facilities that have gone under or are in distress. You don't have to buy everything brand new. Look for bargains. Every time somebody, so I own a laboratory. Every time you take something and you put laboratory grade or laboratory whatever in front of something, it now is 10 times more expensive. So the same glass jar that is for canning and I can buy for 45 cents, if you made that into a beaker and it has no more glass in it, but it's in a laboratory, I now have to pay $19 a piece for them. Same thing goes in the cannabis industry. There's a lot of people that are predatory in the cannabis industry, whether it's hemp or cannabis. A consultant, God knows how many damn consultants there are in the cannabis industry. And everybody who's grown one pot plant in their mom's closet is a master grower.
This is so true.
And
There's a lot of master growers
There's a lot of master growers, guys.
Don't get me started.
So vet every person that you talk to.
Yeah.
Get references, and if you want to get a certain harvester, if you want to get a certain thing, talk to somebody that's got that harvester. See if you can find it used someplace. Don't buy anything new, and figure out how and fix as many things as you can on your own. Because if you've got to buy or hire people to come in and fix stuff or fix your mistakes, it's going to be costly.
Yeah.
Automate what you can, because labor is expensive. Labor will cost you more than almost anything else. Learn plant nutrition. You cannot grow any plant out of an A-B jug formula. It's not, it's possible, but it usually produces crappy plants because you can't fix imbalances when everything comes out of one jug or another jug. You've got to know some agronomy.
Or have someone that knows
Very-
agronomy.
Yeah.
Which is what
Yeah.
I
Very sound.
But if they know agronomy, make sure they know cannabis.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they won't know one or the other. Conventional agronomy. We regulate cannabis to higher regulatory criteria than we do food. Okay? So you can use fertilizers on food that have heavy metals in them. You cannot use fertilizers on cannabis that are going to go to medical grade use that have heavy metals in them.
I love telling people their food is less clean than their bud.
Baby food, vegetables that go into baby food can have more heavy metals in them than the cannabis that you as an adult can smoke.
Yeah.
So
In most states.
in most states,
Yeah.
Some
exactly.
states don't make you test your
Yeah.
So these are so walk before you run. Scaling up is very, very possible, but make sure that you are very well planned out.
Can save tremendous amounts of time and money. So if you guys been taking your notes, and if there are any questions, this would be the time I'd like to field them. If anybody has anything specific they'd like to ask.
Yes, on the set testing,
Yeah.
what's the average cost for that, and how often do you recommend farms to
Sure.
conduct that testing?
So sap testing is done in pairs. So you do a pair on a crop or a field, and you do a new tissue and or new leaves versus old leaves. So a pair, if you just send in a pair and we bill you, it's $87. But if you pre-buy, there's a 20% discount. Now, the reason why you want to pre-buy is that we recommend that you do it about every other week. Once the crop is at least 18 inches tall, you're doing that every other week throughout the grow season. And that allows you to steer it. And so getting that 20% discount is really critical. And you can use this in conjunction with what we call a quick soil, which is similar to a saturated paste. So you can also look at what's in your root zone and soil solution, which is readily which is a readily uptakeable nutrient right in the root zone into that new tissue. Okay, so we're looking at transpiration movement from the roots up into the new tissue. So it's all xylem movement. Whereas the differential, when we're looking at new versus old, we're really looking at the movement of nutrients in the phloem. And so we want to see, okay, what's going on with mobile nutrients, which are a lot of your macros like phosphorus and potassium, magnesium. And we're seeing if we over apply nutrients, the plant's going to take that excess and store it in the old tissue. Okay, it shunts it to the old tissue. Well, whereas if the plant is having a deficiency in uptake, it will scavenge the nutrient from the old tissue to feed the growth in the new tissue. That's right. So you see an imbalance. And so what we look at is the relative differential between the new and the old. And you'll see, so I use the term uptake rather than deficiency in application because there might be adequate amounts in the soil, but it's such a complex relationship between what's sitting in our soil chemistry and what actually is being taken up by the plant. Because there can actually be an imbalance within the plant that's causing it to not take it up, and there could be an imbalance in the soil or soil biology, just a ton of different things going on. Yeah.
And are you able to see like broad spectrum of things that are having differences between the old and the new, heavy metals, what type of stuff can sap testing?
We are just scratching the surface about what plant sap analysis can tell us. I mean, we're starting to investigate heavy metal uptake in sap. We're starting to look at cannabinoid levels in sap. We're starting to look at sugar panels. So we look at total sugar, but now we're starting to break the total sugar apart into different types like sucrose, glucose, dextrose to see, okay, based on what the sugar is that affecting where the nitrogen source is that plant's getting? And so maybe we should be changing the fertilizer that's being applied to that crop because it's getting a poor sugar breakdown inside the plant. So we don't know. There's so much we don't know yet. Yeah.
And that goes across every single area of this industry, I might have to add. There's so much that we don't know. We're so new. And I would say, maybe 10 years, 20 years from now, I might say, do you remember those days when we didn't know anything?
But we are all master growers.
But we were all master
They're all master growers. I'm telling you.
Back in the day when we were all master growers, but we didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I love being in a room with that and 30 master growers and nobody has one horticultural degree between any of them. It
They've only
blows
spent
my
one
mind.
season in Humboldt.
So are there any other questions? Now's your time to pick the mind of a grower botanist.
I'll keep going then. On the cannabinoids that you're starting to look at with
Yeah.
sap testing, what kind of things are you discovering from that aspect? That might be what help improve the cannabinoid outputs at harvest for a farm?
So what we're really doing right now is really almost in its infantile state. So from plant sap analysis, we're really looking at just the fan leaf and the petiole. So what we're trying to gauge right now is how much THCA, CBDA, CBG, and CBN. What is actually in the sap coming out of the fan leaf? Of course, everybody says, "Oh, it doesn't come from the fan leaf." BS. Mm-hmm. It's definitely there. I mean, those are your factories, and this is why I argue with so many growers.
Fan leaf, does that correspond to what ends up in the trichome?
Don't know that yet. That's the problem we have because we're the lab. So we need more growers that are clients to start collaborating with us to say, okay, this is what we're seeing in your cannabinoids during your grow. When you harvest, we need you to give us your potency numbers and your yield so that we can start tying these things together on these studies. And that's just a matter of time. But yeah, I mean,
In the future is more data.
yeah, and this is one of my arguments with my growers about lollipopping. I am not a fan of lollipopping because I believe it just takes away all the factories that this plant needs, and we're storing all these nutrients, mobile nutrients that we've given to the plant, and we trim off all these leaves. Well, we're taking money that we put into that plant and we're throwing it away. Mm-hmm. And these are photosynthetic cells that we've produced. And in indoor grow, we just trim it all off. And it's like, I just don't understand it.
I've constantly told people too, the MEV and the MEP pathway is responsible for differentiating terpenes. And these constituents also alliterate to other cannabinoids. And they are in the green parts of the plant. The more green areas of the plant you limit to do its function, the less diversification of these chemicals you're going to have, period. If you don't have functioning MEV and MEP elliptical pathways, you don't get the differentiation of these isoprenes from the Krebs cycle. But people would know this if they had a background in horticulture and understand the physiology. It's like taking little parts of your lung out to us when you're taking off these green parts of the plant, as you're saying, with healthy petioles on them. Some people will say it goes for pests. Well, I argue your IPM knowledge. Mm-hmm. We'll see. So if the plant had more areas to diversify these defensive constituents, you probably wouldn't have such of a pest problem. Yeah. But this is why we should seek out people, like you said, who have not just been following recipes in their mother's basement for years. You can contact me. I'm a horticultural scientist. I know plant physiology. I know root ecology. I know the correlation of insects to abiotic stressors to biotic stressors and how they affect the plant's physiology. You know, if you,
Finding more farmers becoming more sophisticated with that approach.
what I'm finding is more farmers. I'm finding more farmers who are looking to the universities for help. But the problem is cannabis research is not a thing in universities. So they've all been basically more or less coming to me because I'm the only one who's focusing horticulturally and agronomically, specifically on cannabis and the traditional inputs and how they correlate to what we're doing now. Yeah, I have a research project out that it's investigating the methods such as you was talking about, lollipopping, scrogging, things we've done at small scale because they were productive to our end goal. But now we've adopted some of these things and put them in scale. Now you got people who have large grow houses who are in there paying manpower for people to come in there and yank off healthy parts of plants because it's something they've done traditionally. You know, I can argue all these, and we've gone to try and quantify these things. So you've put X amount of manpower into getting this plant, into essentially all you're doing is changing the morphology of the plant. Its function is still the same, but to you aesthetically, it may look more pleasing. But now, how much has that cost you? Now you've had to hire 4 more bud tenders. You know, it's there's things that study was aimed to investigate, like why are we doing these things, and if they're done at scale, is it actually beneficial? So you know, these are areas that I would love everybody to contact us or somebody up here about, you know, moving forward. Yeah. With that being said,
I think that gentleman over there.
Oh, I didn't catch you over there. Sorry. Hmm.
So you said that stat testing and also you said like you're gonna have one field that has a issue and one that doesn't. Could you like figure out what makes it more attractive and maybe have like a martyr plant or something that brings them all to that one you can get rid of?
Oh, we have trap plants. That's something that's done traditionally in horticulture. It's a very old school thing. You find what they like more and you put more of that there. Or we use them as indicator plants. So if there is going to be an infestation, you can use this plant to indicate or assay everything else. One thing people have an issue with is I have an issue with is just the monoculture culture in cannabis. You know, if you were to give a couple foot square feet in your grow to different plants, marigolds, sunflowers, pepper plants, these things can have a huge impact on your grow at scale.
I want to chime in on that. Also, mushrooms.
Yeah.
We use mushrooms to get our CO2. We do not buy our CO2. We do not run out of CO2. We have a mushroom. One of my buddies has a mushroom cultivation facility that we started doing this at. We're still in prototype type stages, but I will tell you, mushrooms are a great thing to have in your grow room. As long as you can not inside of your grow room, but they're pretty cool. And you should definitely, if you're looking at putting stuff in, maybe give that a chance and do some research into that and play with it on your own, with your own plants, because it's one of those things that we're working on, and I don't see anyone else doing it.
With any of these people after the discussion, please. You and
Yeah.
no?
So far as the scaling for the mushrooms, like what is the ratio between mushrooms to?
We have a 250 square foot room.
Okay.
And our other rooms are about 750.
How big of a culture bag would you put in there, or are you
I
culturing?
don't. I would have. My partner's not
logs?
here today. I would have to ask him that question.
Okay.
But he's the mushroom guy, not me.
Yeah.
But I could get back to you on that definitely.
Yeah. No, it's something we've toyed with in the university too. I was just wondering how.
We're playing
much
with it now. We still haven't worked out all the nicks and kinks.
Yeah.
But it's a fun. Yeah.
Cool. I think we've had a cool discussion. I'd like to touch base with anybody else after the discussion and thank our panelists for taking time out of their day.